Shana Tova. We'll begin to gather ourselves this morning, this beautiful second day of this new year. Just a few of us are here in the sanctuary together, and we're glad to welcome those of you who are joining us remotely. We'll begin this morning with the favorite verse from Psalm 27. It's printed in your machzor on page 1218. Page 1218. Achat shalti me'et Adonai. Achat shalti ota avakesh. Achat shalti me'et Adonai. Achat shalti ota avakesh. Shifti, shifti, bevet Adonai. Shifti, shifti, kol yamei chayai. Shifti, shifti, bevet Adonai. Shifti, shifti, kol yamei chayai. Lachazot benoam Adonai. To gaze upon the beauty of Adonai. One thing I ask of you, my God, to be with you all of my life. Lachazot benoam Adonai. To gaze upon the beauty of Adonai. Achat shalti me'et Adonai. Achat shalti ota avakesh. Turn back now in the machzor to page 270. Page 270. Allowing ourselves for this holiday to explore that imagery of the source of life as a great sovereign, tending to her nation with love. Page 270. Ay, 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 Hamelech Yoshev al kiseram v'nisa. Next page. Shochen ad marom v'kadosh shemo. V'chatuv rananut tzadikim b'Adonai laisharim
נאווה תהילה, בפי שרים תתרומם, ובדברי צדיקים תתברך, ובלשון חסידים תתקדש, ובקרב קדושים תתהלל, ובמחלות רבבות עמך בית ישראל, ברינה יתפאר שמך מלכנו בכל דור ודור, שכן חובת כל היצורים לפניך אדוני. להודות, להלל, לשבח, לפאר, לרומם, להדר, לברך, להלל, לקלס על כל דברי שירות ותשבחות. דוד בן ישי, עבדך משיחך, ישתבח שמך לעד מלכנו, האל המלך הגדול והקדוש בשמיים ובארץ, כי לך נאה אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו ואמותינו. שיר ושבח הלל וזמרה עוז וממשלה, נצח גדולה גבורה תהילה ותפארת, קדושה ומלכות, ברכות והודאות מעתה ועד עולם. ברוך אתה אדוני אל מלך גדול בתשבחות, אל ההודאות אדון הנפלאות, הבוחר בשירי זמרה, מלך אלכי העולמים.
Allow ourselves a moment to inhale fully and exhale fully and lift our consciousness towards praise. And allow that to be our Chatzi Kaddish. Now inviting all of us to rise together, page 278, rising here in our space or wherever we are this morning to join in community and in celebration. Page 278.
Barechu et Adonai hamevorach. Baruch. Baruch Adonai hamevorach leolam va'ed. 280. Baruch ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, yotzer or uvorech choshech, oser shalom uvore et hakol, or olam beotzar chaim, orot meofel amar vayehi.
We continue now from our seats. Turn with me ahead to page 300. Appreciating this most glorious day and tuning into the eternal love that we summon in our prayers. Page 300.
Ahava rabavtanu Adonai Eloheinu, chemla gedola v'terachamata aleinu, avinu malkeinu ba'avur avotenu v'imotenu. Amrachem rachem aleinu v'ten belibenu, lehavinu lehaskir, lishmor lilmod ulelamed, לשמור ולעשות ולקיים את כל דברי תלמוד תורתך באהבה. 302. והאר עינינו בתורתך ודבק ליבנו במצוותיך, ויחד לבבינו לאהבה ליראה את שמך, ולא נבוש ולא ניכלם ולא ניכשל לעולם ועד. כי בשם קודשך הגדול והנורא בטחנו, נגילה ונשמחה בישועתך. והביאנו לשלום מארבע כנפות הארץ, והביאנו לשלום מארבע כנפות הארץ, ותוליכנו קוממיות לארצנו, כי אל פועל ישועות אתה, וקרבתנו לשמך הגדול. סלע באמת להודות לך ולייחדך באהבה. ברוך אתה אדוני אוהב עמו ישראל. שמע ישראל אדוני אלוהינו אדוני אחד. ברוך שם כבודו לעולם ועד. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך. והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך. A moment now for us to reflect on our own quietly these middle passages of the Shema, the intervening pages, and we'll join together again to close the Shema. והיה אם שמוע תשמעו מצוותיי. ושמתם את דבריי לבכם ונפשכם. And I'll continue now, page 312. Join me as you're ready. ויאמר אדוני אל משה לאמור, דבר אל בני ישראל ואמרת עליהם ועשו להם ציצית על כנפי בגדיהם לדורותם, ונתנו על ציצית הכנף פתיל תכלת, והיה לכם לציצית וריתם אותו, וזכרתם את כל מצוות אדוני ועשיתם אותם, ולא תטורו אחרי לבבכם ואחרי עיניכם אשר אתם זונים אחריהם, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם. אדוני אלוהיכם אמת.
make our transition now to the redemption song on page 318 in our books. And it's just a total pleasure to welcome Chazan Mike Zusman to the Shulchan to lead us through the Amidah, beginning first with page 318.
Shana Tova. Tehilot le'el elyon, baruch hu v'orach, Moshe u'Miriam u'vnei Yisrael, lechanu shira, b'simcha rabba, ve'amru chulam, mi chamocha ma'elim Adonai, mi chamocha nedar b'kodesh, Nora tehilot o sefer Shira chadasha shibechu geulim L'shimcha al sefatayam Yachad kulam hodu V'himlichu ve'amru Adonai imloch le'olam va'ed. Please rise. Tzur Yisrael, kuma be'ezrat Yisrael, uvdechinu mecha Yehuda v'Yisrael, go'aleinu Adonai tzvaot shemo, kedosh Yisrael, baruch atah Adonai, Ga'al Yisrael. Turning now to the Kavanah to prepare us for the Amidah, page 322, Ochila La'el. I yearn for the divine. Ochila La'el achalef anav eshal mimenu ma'aneh lashon asher bikal am ashira uzo abiar nanot be'ad mifalav L'adam ma'arechei lev Adonai ma'aneh lashon Adonai sifatai tiftach ufi yagid tehilatecha Yihiu l'ratzon imrei fim V'hegion libi lefanecha Adonai tzuri v'go'ali Turning to 324. Adonai sifatai tiftach ufi yagin tehilatecha Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu ve'Elohei avoteinu ve'imotenu Elohei Avraham Elohei Sarah, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei
Elohei Rivka, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah. 326. Ha'el, Ha'gadol, Ha'gibor, Le'hanora, El Elyon, Gomer Chasadim Tovim, V'konei hakol, V'zocher chasdei avot v'imot, U'mevi geula livnei v'neihem, Leman shemo be'ahava. Misod chachamim u'nevonim u'milemed dat mevinim Eftecha fi mitzvila uv'tachanunim lechalot u'lechanein Pnei melech malchei malachim v'adonei ha'adonim.
328. Remember these additions for life, the theme for life throughout this high holidays.
Zochrenu lechayim, melech chafetz b'chayim, v'chotvenu b'sefer hachayim, lemancha Elohim chayim, melech ozer u'moshiach u'poged magen, Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham u'poged ve'ezrat Sarah.
Turning to 330, invoking God's might.
אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני רב להושיע מוריד הצל מכלכל חיים בחסד מחיים כל חי ברחמים רבים סומך נופלים ברופא חולים ומתיר אסורים ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר מי כמוך בעל גבורות ומי דומה לך מלך מימית ומחיה ומצמיח ישועה מי כמוך אב הרחמים זוכה יצוריו לחיים ברחמים.
We remain standing.
ונאמן אתה להחיות כל חי ברוך אתה אדוני מחיה כל
And we still remain standing, resurrected, Turning now to page 348. Page 348. As the ark is opened for Untitled Chapter, liturgical poem that calls to mind the apex of this day.
ובכן ולך תעלה קדושה, כי אתה אלוהינו מלך. ונתנל תוקף קדושת היום, כי הוא נורא ואיום, ובו תינשא מלכותך, ויקון בחסד כיסאך, ותשב עליו באמת. אמת כי אתה הוא דיין ומוכיח ויודע ועד, וחותם וסופר ומונה, ותזכור כל הנשכחות, ותפתח את ספר הזיכרונות, ותפתח את ספר הזיכרונות, ומאליו יקרב, וחותם יד כל אדם בו, כל אדם בו. ובשופר גדול ייתקע, וכל דממה דקה יישמע, ומלאכים יחפזון, וחילון עדי יוחזון, ומלאכים יחפזון, וחילון עדי יוחזון, ויאמרו הנה יום הדין, לפקוד על צבא מרום בדין, כי לא יזכו עיניך בדין, וכל בעלי עולם יעברו לפניך, כבני מרון, כבני מרון. Karat roe et rom avir tsono tachat shivto kein tavir v'tispor v'timene v'tivkod nefesh kol chai v'tachtoch kitzva lechol beria Tichtov, et gezor dino. Berosh Hashanah yikatevun, uvyom tzom kippur yechatemun. Berosh Hashanah yikatevun, uvyom tzom kippur yechatemun. Berosh Hashanah yikatevun, v'yom tzom kippur yechatemun. Kama yavrun v'chama yibareyun. Michyeh ומי ימות, מי וקיצור, ומי לא וקיצור. בראש השנה ייכתבון, וביום צום כיפור, וביום צום כיפור ייכתבון. בראש השנה ייכתבון, וביום צום כיפור, וביום צום כיפור ייכתבון. מי באש ומי במים, מי בחרב ומי בחיה, מי ברב ומי בצמא. בראש השנה ייכתבון, וביום צום כיפור ייכתבון. בראש השנה ייכתבון, וביום צום כיפור מי ורש ומי ומגפה, מי ורש ומי ומגפה, מי וחניקה, ומי וסקילה. בראש השנה ייכתבון, וביום צום כיפור ייכתבון. בראש השנה ייכתבון, וביום צום כיפור ייחתמון. בראש השנה ייכתבון, וביום צום כיפור ייכתבון. מי ינוח ומי ינוח, מי ישקיט ומי יטורף, מי ישלב ומי יתייסר, מי עני ומי עשיר, מי יושפל ומי ירום. 352. Utshuva, utfila, ein, utzraka, mavirin, etroa, ein, Hagizera.
But teshuvah and tefillah and tzedakah is the decree.
Ki kashimecha, kein tihilatecha, kasher lichos v'noach lirtzot, ki lo tachpot b'mot hamet, ki im shuvo mitar kol v'chaya, v'yad yomoto techakelo, im yashuv miyad tegabelo. Emet, emet, ki ata hu yotzram, ve'ata yodea yitzram, ki hem basar v'adam, Adam yisodom me'afar, v'sofo le'afar, בנפשו יביא לחמו, בנפשו יביא לחמו. משול כחרס הנשבר, כחציר יבש וכציץ נובל, כצל עובר וכענן כלם, וכרוח נושבת וכבק פורח, וכחלום יעוף. ואתה הוא מלך אל חי וקיים. אין קצבה לשנותיך ואין קץ לאורך ימיך ואין שיעור למרכבות כבודך ואין פירוש לאלום שמך. שמך נאה לך ואתה נאה לשמך ושמנו קראת בשמך.
The ark is closed as we turn to the Kiddushah, prayer of the holiness of this day on 356.
עשה למען שמך וקדש את שמך על מקדישי שמך בעבור כבוד שמך הנערות הנקדש כסוד שיח שרפי קודש המקדישים שמך בקודש דרי מלאים דרי מטה ככתוב על יד נביאך וקרא זה על זה אמר קדוש קדוש קדוש, 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 אדוני צבאות, מלוך כל הארץ כבודו, כבודו מלא עולם. משרתיו שואלים זה לזה, איה מקום כבודו ליומתם. ברוך יאמרו ברוך ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו הוא יפן ברחמים ויחונם המייחדים שמו ערב ובוקר בכל יום תמיד פעמיים באהבה שמה אומרים שמה ישראל אדוני אלוהינו אדוני אחד הוא אלוהינו עמנו היא מלכתנו ומושיענו והוא ישמיענו ברחמיו שנית לעיני כל חי והוא ישמיענו ברחמיו שנית לעיני כל חי לחיות לכם לאלוהים אני אדוני אלוהיכם אדיר אדירנו אדוני אדוננו מאדיר שמך בכל הארץ והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יחיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד ובדברי קודשך כתוב לאמור ימלוך אדוני לעולם אלוהיך ציון לדור ודור הללויה לדור ודור נגיד גודלך לדור ודור לדור ודור נגיד גודלך, ולנצח נצחים קדושתך נקדיש, קדושתך נקדיש, ושבחך אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש לעולם ועד, לדור ודור, לדור ודור. לדור ודור נגיד גודלך, לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיד גודלך, כי אל מלך גדול, גדול וקדוש, גדול וקדוש אתה. איי 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 איי
Turning now ahead to page 364 as we come to the conclusion of the Kedusha.
ובכן תן פחדך אדוני אלוהינו על כל מעשיך ואימתך על כל מה שבראת ויראוך כל המעשים וישתחוו לפניך כל הבדויים ויעשוך למגודה אחת לעשות רצונך בלבב שלם כמו שידענו אדוני אלוהינו שהשלטון לפניך עוז בידך וגבורה בימינך ושמך נורא על כל מה שבראת ובכן תן כבוד אדוני לעמך תהילה ליראיך ותקווה לדורשך ופתחון פה למייחלים לך שמחה לארצך וששון לעירך במהרה בימינו 366 ובכן צדיקים יראו וישמחו וישרים יעלוזו וחסידים ברינה יגילו ויולת תקפוץ פיך וכל הרשעה כולה כעשן תכלה כי תעביר ממשלת זדון מן הארץ ותמלוך אתה אדוני לבדך כל מעשיך בהר ציון משכן כבודך ובירושלים עיר קודשך ככתוב בדברי קודשך ימלוך אדוני לעולם אלוהיך ציון לדור ודור הללויה קדוש אתה ונורא שמך ואין אלוהך מבלעדיך ככתוב ויגבח אדוני צבאות במשפט והאל הקדוש נקדש ויצדקה ברוך את יה שכינה המלכה הקדושה
Those enormous, beautiful passages now vibrating inside of us, we have time, a few moments for our own prayers, following the rest of the Amidah as laid out in our machzor, or following those promptings, as always, in our hearts. can take our time completing our own private prayers. And as we're ready, turn together to page 382 to join ourselves together. Once again, those of us here in the room together, joining with those that are with us remotely from many different locations. All of us tuning in together to the highest prayer of peace. The words are on page 382.
עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו. ועל כל ישראל ועל כל יושבי תבל, ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו. ועל כל ישראל ועל כל יושבי תבל, ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן.
Welcome to everyone online. We haven't shouted out to you yet. I hope you feel the electricity in the room as we return to each other, to the liturgy, to the power of this day, and to what our ancestors have written about it, and to the incredible oomph given to it by Rav Zahn and Chazan and Cheryl and all of us. Turning to Avinu Malkeinu. Yesterday, we introduced it with a reminder that Av, parent, is imminent, close in to us, while Melech, ruler, is far away. They complement each other. Neither image for God stands fully on its own. No single metaphor does, not even the hundreds that tradition makes available to us. With countless options to choose from, see page 458 as an example. All of that still pertains. Today, one more angle, the potential oddness of a list of petitions made to a God on high who we're not sure even exists in a way that would or could receive them, much less does and listens attentively and grants selectively the wishes of his, and I use that pronoun advisedly here, his people. Tradition calls this hashgacha pratit, personal oversight, literally like God is our omnipresent mashgiach, making sure we are kosher enough and also helping us as needed. The first two words, Avinu and Malkeinu, come in for the greatest questioning, but maybe it's the third word of each line, the imperative verb, that is at some level our deepest question. Aseh, act, we ask of God. Kotvenu, inscribe, we insist. Kaleh, remove. Chonenu, be gracious. Such demands we're making, even despite our doubts about divine dispensation. Writer Anne Lamott, Help, Thanks, Wow, acknowledges our theological diversity and also the breadth of ways we might pray. I share this passage to hopefully open doors not only at the metaphorical level of God, but at what this whole enterprise of petitionary prayer is about. Some of us, she writes, have cavernous vibrations inside us when we communicate with God. Others are more rational and less messy in our spiritual sense of reality, in our petitions and gratitude and expressions of pain or anger or desolation or praise. Prayer can mean that in some unique way we believe we're invited into a relationship with one who hears us when we speak in silence. We can pray for a shot at having a life in which we are present and awake and paying attention and being kind to ourselves. Prayer can be motion and stillness and energy all at the same time. So God can be both immanent and transcendent, both male and female. We can be flawed and great. We can pray as believers and non-believers, sometimes in the same instant, because prayer can be motion and stillness and energy all at the same time. Page 458 with liturgical options. Page 452 for the traditional rendition. We rise as we are able. Avinu Malkeinu.
I want to invite Mark Klapow and Margie Cutler to the bima to open the ark. You start. You start.
Okay.
Avinu Malkeinu Chatanu Lefanecha Mekorenu Eloheinu En Lanu Malka Elat Yimenu Malkatenu Aseh Imanu Leman Shemech Avinu Malkeinu Chadesh Aleinu Shana Tova. Avinu Malkeinu Avinu Malkeinu Salach Mechanu Chol Avorotenu Malkeinu Chol Shema.
Our parent, our sovereign, inscribe us in the book of redemption and salvation. Our parent, our sovereign, inscribe us in the book of sustenance and livelihood. Our parent, our sovereign, inscribe us in the book of merit. Our parent, our sovereign, inscribe us in the book of forgiveness and atonement. Avinu Malkeinu, Chonenu Vanenu. Avinu Malkeinu, Chonenu Vanenu, Ki ein banu maasim. Aseh imanu, tzedakah v'chesed. Aseh imanu, tzedakah v'chesed, lehoshiyenu. Avinu Malkeinu, Chanenu Vanenu, Avinu Malkeinu, Chanenu Vanenu, Masim Aseimanu, Tzedakah v'chesed, Aseimanu, Tzedakah v'chesed, ve'hoshienu, Avinu Malkeinu, Chonenu vanenu, Avinu Malkeinu, Chonenu vanenu, Ki ein banu masim.
Ask us now to remain standing. We'll turn ahead to the full Kaddish, page 462, and ask Chazan Mike to lead us as we then turn to the Torah service. The ark will be closed momentarily. I'm sorry, you can be seated for this if you prefer.
יתקדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, בעלמא דברך כנותהו ינוח מלכותי, בחייכון וביומכון ובחיי לכל בית ישראל, ועגלה בזמן קריב, ואמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מברך, לעלם ולעלמי עלמיה. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמך קודשם בריחו לעילא לעילא מכל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דאמרן בעלמא ואמרו אמן אמן. תתקבל צלות ההון ובאות ההון לכל ישראל קודם בהון וישמעיה ואמרו אמן. יהי שלום רבן שמעיה וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל כל יושבי תבל ואמרו אמן.
Please join me in saying Yasher Koach to Chazan Mike Zusman. We'll get to hear more from him later this morning, but what a gift for us to come into the year this way. Now turn to the Torah service, beginning on page 464 in your Machzor, and invite Cheryl Hurwitz to lead us. You're not leading the Torah service? Yeah, I know.
אין כמוך באלוהים אדוני ואין כמעשיך מלכותך מלכות כל עולמים וממשלתך בכל דור ודור. אדוני מלך אדוני מלך אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. Adonai oz le'amo yitain, Adonai yivarech et amo v'shalom. Av harachamim etiva v'tzoncha et Zion. Tivnei chomot Yerushalayim, Tivnei chomot Yerushalayim, Ki v'cha לבד בטחנו, מלך אל רם ונישא, אדון עולמי. פיתחו לי שערי צדק, אבוא ומודיה. פיתחו לי שערי צדק, אבוא ומודיה. זהו שער לאדוני, צדיקים יבואו בו. זהו שער לאדוני, צדיקים יבואו בו.
Page 468 at the bottom. Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum Vechanun, Erech Apayim, Berav Chesed Ve'emet, Notze Chesed La'alafim, Nose Avon Vafesha, V'chata v'nakeh. Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum V'chanun, Erech Apayim, V'rav Chesed V'emet, Notze Chesed La'alafim, Nose Avon Vafesha, V'chata v'nakeh. Va'ani tefilati lecha havaya et ratzon. Elohim berov chasdecha, aneni, aneni, be'emet yishecha. Page 470, Cheryl leads and we respond.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu,
Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonainu, Kadosh v'nora Shemo.
Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh v'nora Shemo.
Gadlun Adonai itir, uneromema Shemo yachdav.
You may be seated. Reiterating, as Rabbi Rachel noted yesterday, the day will soon come when we again will be able to not worry about processing. Introducing the Akedah. A lot of ahs in our tradition. Medieval Spanish Jewish philosopher Abarbanel alive at the time that Columbus sailed, wrote, "The binding of Isaac is forever on our lips and in our prayers, for in it lies the entire strength of Israel and their merit before the Heavenly Father." My preferred interpretation, and many of ours, with support from Rashi, who suggests that Abraham might have misinterpreted the call at the beginning of the story, is actually quite different. Understanding that perhaps Abraham essentially flunked the Nisa, the test, with his blind obedience to fulfill an immoral order, which would explain why the blessings he receives at the end of the story contain nothing new in them, why Abraham didn't deserve, like Moses, to go straight to receiving Torah. But in a provocative essay by Through Reconstructing Judaism, Canadian lay leader Sidney Nestel also asks what we liberal moderns might learn from the dominant understanding over time, which valorizes Abraham for his readiness to sacrifice based on his read of the divine word. Nestel writes, "The traditional message is crystal clear. There are indeed values worth sacrificing for, and some values are worth dying for. And some values are worth even more than that. They are worth endangering and even sacrificing our children for. And it is precisely our ability to sacrifice for higher values that makes us worthy and allows us to survive as a people." This approach, of course, begs further questions. How much sacrifice is enough or necessary or too much? Can anything worthwhile be accomplished without willingness to sacrifice some or all of what is most dear to us? To what extent can or should we coerce our children for the sake of our beliefs? Today, September 8th, 2nd of Tishrei, falls right between the Hebrew and Gregorian yahrzeits for 3,000 innocents 2 decades ago this week in New York, Arlington, and Shanksville. Before we go too far down that old road of celebrating Abraham for believing that God wanted him to kill and coming within seconds of doing so, we must recognize in the Akedah the template for and potential justification of future religiously inspired fanatic violence. Sidney Nestel in this essay is not blind to this danger, and holding that asks us to also pluralistically consider if within the Akedah there might not also be, or instead, a model for the formation and survival of any human community that wishes to transmit its values from one generation to the next. Discomforting questions, important ones, with no easy answers, which is maybe why this enigmatic text is also timeless, why our annual tradition on the second day of our new year includes it. If the lesson were clearer, we wouldn't need to review it each year. If the stakes were lower, we wouldn't keep it in its vaunted place. But as it stands, it belongs here. On Yom Kippur, a week and a day from now, we will focus on avodah. As challenged yesterday, we are to find our sacred calling and tune into what matters most. Today's Torah reading, Genesis 22, challenges us one step yet further. What would or wouldn't we do, or risk or sacrifice, to bring that avodah about? Page 482, the opening of the Akedah, inviting our Gabbai and our first reader and Aliyah to join us. Genesis chapter 22, verse 1, the test.
ויעזור ויגן ויושיע לכל החוסים בו ונאמר אמן. הכל הבו גודל אלוהינו תנו כבוד לתורה. יעמוד רפאל חנן בן נחמן אליהו וגילה שרה לעלייה הראשונה. ברוך שנתן תורה לעמו ישראל בקדושתו. ואתם מדליקים באדוני אלוהיכם חיים כולכם היום.
Here.
Baruch et Adonai HaMvorach.
Baruch Adonai Amorach Leolam Vaed.
Baruch Adonai HaMvorach Leolam Vaed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kervanu lavodato v'natan lanu et torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Vayhi. אחר הדברים האלה והאלוהים נישא את אברהם ויאמר אליו אברהם ויאמר הנני ויאמר קח נא את בנך את יחידך אשר אהבת את יצחק ולך לך אל ארץ המוריה ועלהו שם לעולה על אחד ההרים אשר אמר אליך וישכם אברהם בבוקר ויחבוש את חמורו ויקח את שני נעריו איתו ואת יצחק בנו ויבקע את שאולה ויקום וילך אל המקום אשר אמר לו האלוהים.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu torat emet v'chayei olam natan betochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Yishar koach, sir. It's a pleasure, Rafi, to have you come up. I think it's almost either just before or just after the first anniversary of your bar mitzvah. And it's a delight to see you here participating and helping to move this story forward for us. We're going to invite our aliyot to come up and go down immediately, just abiding by some of the COVID restrictions here.
We also had last year's page numbers when we did the first day reading on the second day, so apologies if you were thinking, wait, Hagar isn't in this story. We are now on page 506 for the second aliyah of the second day Torah reading.
Oh, right. Okay. So now to call Bruce and Susan Stein, and I'm going to ask you to come forward and give me your Hebrew names. I don't have them in front of me. Ya'amdu Yitzchak Aryeh ben Tzvi HaKohen ve. It's okay. Susan bat Abraham v'Sara la'aliyah hashniya. Kiss.
Right over here.
Baruch et Adonai HaMvorach.
Baruch Adonai Amorach Leolam Vaed.
Baruch Adonai HaMvorach Leolam Vaed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kirvanu la'avodato v'natan lanu et torato. Baruch atah Adonai
Noten HaTorah.
Amen. Bayom hashlishi. Vayisa Abraham et einav vayarat hamakom merachok. Vayomer Abraham el na'arav shuvu lachem po im hachamor va'ani v'hanar nelcha ad ko v'nishtachave v'nashuva alechem. ויקח אברהם את עצי העולה, וישם על יצחק בנו, ויקח בידו את האש ואת המאכלת, וילכו שניהם יחדיו. ויאמר יצחק אל אברהם, אבי, ויאמר אבי, ויאמר הנני בני, ויאמר הנה האש והעצים, ויעשה לעולה. ויאמר אברהם אלוהים יראה לו עשה לעולה בני, וילכו שניהם יחדיו.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torat emet, v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten HaTorah.
Amen. Yasher koach to Ken Avner, and Bruce and Susan have been on their own journey, not in search of a place to sacrifice either of their sons, but to visit them. And Susan, I think you have a little bit of news to share.
Yes, and thank you for this opportunity. I, in mid-July, retired from federal service, 32 years with the U.S. Forest Service. So big summer for me.
Mazal tov. And wish you both well as you come down from the bima and into whatever this new chapter will now bring for you. The third aliyah, Ken, are you going to take over here? So actually, let me just call it because I don't know her name. Ta'amod Tamar Rachel bat Harav Shalom ve Shoshana la'aliyah hashlishit. We're continuing now. Sorry, the microphone is here, then it has to be there. 508. Yeah, page 508 in the Machzor, Genesis 22, beginning with verse 9. Kayla Niles will read.
I have to find it. Right here.
Baruch Adonai and Baruch.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kirvanu la'avodato v'natan lanu et torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten HaTorah.
Amen. Vayavo el hamakom asher amar lo Elohim. Vayiven sham Avraham et hamizbeach, vayaroch et ha'etzim, vayakod et Yitzchak beno, vayahasem oto al hamizbeach mima'al ha'etzim. Vayishlach Avraham et yado, vayikach et hama'achelet lishchot et beno. Vayikra elav malach Adonai min hashamayim, vayomer Avraham, Avraham, vayomer hineni, vayomer al tishlach yadcha el hana'ar, v'al ta'as lo me'uma, ki ata yadati
כי ירא אלוהים אתה, ולא חסכת את בנך יחידך ממני. וישא אברהם את עיניו, וירא והנה איל אחר, נאחז בסבך בקרניו. וילך אברהם ויקח את האיל, ויעלהו לעולה תחת בנו. ויקרא אברהם שם המקום ההוא אדוני יראה, אשר יאמר היום בהר אדוני יראה.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah emet, v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Yishar kochech, Kayla. But we're going to say Mishaberach Lecholim first. So we'll pause now for just a moment. Just want to say Yashar Koach to Jenny for coming forward. It's always a pleasure to have you in the house here. And even though you live far away in Eretz Yisrael, it's a pleasure for us to have you here with us for the holidays. And I know even more so for your family. We'll pause now for a prayer for healing. Turn to Beth Sperber Ritchie.
So for those of you who are at home and on Zoom, if you want to put the name or names of the person that you're holding for healing in the chat. And for those of us who are in the room, if you want to stand and we'll say the names all together. So all together, we'll say those names all together now. Mishberach Avotenu v'imotenu hu yivarech et hacholim hu yivarech et hacholot veyanik lehem orech ruach ometz lev u'refuah shlema. Amen. Mishaberach Avotenu v'imotenu hu yivarech et hacholim hu yivarech et hacholot vayanik lehem orech ruach ometz lev u'refuah shlema. Amen. May the one who blessed all those who came before give patience and courage to us now. Help us find the strength to nurture and to bring a full healing. Amen. Mishaberach Avotenu v'imotenu hu yivarech et hacholim hu yivarech et hacholot vayanik lahem orech ruach ometz lev u'refuah shlema. Amen. Refuat hanefesh, refuat haguf, refuah shlema.
Jeff Turetsky, we'd like to call you forward for this aliyah.
Ya'amod Yitzchak ben Moshe v'Sheva Chana Aliyah HaMaftir.
Baruch Hu Adonai Hamvarach.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam Asher Karvanu Levodato V'natan Lanu et Torataho. Baruch Atah Adonai Notein HaTorah.
Amen. Vayikra Malach Adonai El Avraham Shenit Min HaShamayim Vayomer V'nishbati Neum Adonai Ki Yahan Asher Asita Et Hadavar Hazeh V'lo chasachta et binchat yechidecha ki varecha varechecha v'hirba arbe et zaracha kechochvei hashamayim v'chachol asher asfat hayam v'yirash zaracha et shar oivav v'hitbachu b'zaracha kol goyei haaretz eikev asher shamata bekoli. Vayashav Avraham el Ne'arav vayakumu vayelchu yachdav el Be'er Shava. Vayeshev Avraham Be'er Shava.
Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam Asher natan lanu Torah emet v'kol olam nata b'tocheinu. Baruch Atah Adonai Notein HaTorah.
Amen.
Say Yasher Koach to Kayla and to Jeff Turetsky.
Yamod Hamagvia v'Ta'amod Hagolelet.
Calling forward Jonathan Epstein and also Betsy Turetsky to dress the Torah. Please rise. Shema beni musar avicha ve'al titosh Torat imecha. Shema beni musar avicha ve'al titosh Torat imecha. Torah, Torah, Siva lanu Moshe, Morasha, Morasha, Kehilat Yamos. Torah, Torah, Siva lanu Moshe, Morasha, Morasha, Kehilat Yaakov. Shema beni musar avicha ve'al titosh Torat imecha. Shema beni musar avicha ve'al titosh Kitosh Torat Imecha. We can be seated. Yasher koach to all of our readers this morning. We'll hear more in just a moment. I always feel it's such a relief when we get to the part of the Akedah where you realize that things are going to be okay. I say that, it sounds funny, but I say it not in jest, but to feel that the story of our people have been through many moments of almost sacrifice, almost ending, and yet here we are. I can't help also just to acknowledge it's our custom normally on second day Rosh Hashanah to invite many people to the Bima for Aliyot and to have a chance to highlight this story in quite a different way. And we are just taking a bow to pandemic safety and limiting our physical closeness today, but look forward to being able to turn to the story with that approach and that creativity in the future. Just want to say a few words about the Haftarah, which Jeff Turetsky will share with us in just a moment. If the first day of Rosh Hashanah, the readings point us towards the possibility of fertility, whatever our gender and whatever our moment in life, the possibility of giving birth to something new. The second day, maybe one of the themes, at least in our readings, is the pain and sacrifice of finding our way towards peoplehood. And in some ways, the Haftarah tries to comfort us on that path. We are going to hear words of Jeremiah, which will mostly be about the optimism of return and joining together. We're hearing Jeremiah in a younger part of his career, kind of before he had given up in that. I want to just share a few thoughts about this Haftarah. These biblical texts, the Torah and the prophetic readings, are a window on ancient history. They give us an idea of what was happening and certainly an idea of what the authors of those texts wanted us to know. But they also speak to us in motifs that are beyond time. In the Torah, creation begins, Vayehi Or, and then we know that creation is always going on. It's always being renewed, even right now. The Exodus from Egypt happens again every Pesach, and redemption is always at hand. We all stood at Sinai, and revelation is ongoing. In the words of the prophets, we then see those original stories lifted up to an even more iconic, timeless realm. The prophets use those foundational stories to speak to their own people in the language they know best. In today's Haftarah, we will hear Jeremiah do this with our matriarch, Rachel. As a kid, I loved being associated with this ancestor. I loved the idea that she was my namesake because when I was, third grade or something, I learned that she was beautiful and beloved, even a favorite. But then I came to understand how much her life was one of endless longing and pain, even premature death. And this is where Jeremiah freezes her for all eternity. She's the only one of the ancestors not properly buried in the honored cave of Machpelah. And in Jeremiah's portrayal, she is still there. He's speaking to us from maybe 2,500 years ago, but we are meant to hear this as though she's still sitting there by the side of the road, as he says, weeping for her children. It says in the text, there is no consoling her. And when we hear this passage in the context of the Haftarah, it almost seems like a non sequitur because the verses that come before it and the ones that follow are all about coming back, coming to return, being reunited with our land. And yet in the middle, there she is, weeping and lamenting. And I'm fascinated by the possibility that this is meant to be a timeless, eternal lament. I learned from just reading a marvelous piece about this portrayal of Rachel about a commentary in Echa Rabbah. That according to this commentary, it was her lament that ultimately woke God up. All the other matriarchs and patriarchs tried their hand at waking God's compassion up, but it was only her long lament that actually reached forward. And I'm just going to read this short midrash to you. Rachel, our matriarch, jumped forward before the Holy One of Blessing and said, Master of the universe, it is known before you that your servant Yaakov's love for me knew no bounds, and he worked for my father for 7 years for me. When those 7 years were completed and the time came for my marriage to my husband, my father advised exchanging me with my sister. This was so difficult for me, and when I learned of this counsel, I informed Yaakov, and I gave him a sign so that he could distinguish between me and my sister. And she goes on, laying out all that she's been through. After that, I consoled myself. I suffered my desire and had compassion for my sister that she not suffer disgrace. I tried to act kindly with her. I was not jealous with her, and I did not cause her to be ashamed or disgraced. I tried to be a good spouse and sister. What am I, flesh and blood, dust and ashes, that I was not jealous of my rival wife and I did not allow her to be shamed and disgraced? But you, merciful, living, and eternal King, why were you jealous of idolatry? That is of no import, and exiled my children who were slain by the sword and allowed their enemies to do with them as they pleased. God's mercy was immediately revealed because of her lament. He said, for your sake, Rachel, I shall return Israel to their place. For there is a reward for your labor, and there is hope for your future. It says in this haftarah, V'shavu vanim ligvulam, the children will return to their borders. And if Rachel is still sitting by the road weeping after 1948, it can only be that we're meant to hear this turned on its head, that Rachel is still sitting there weeping for her children in hopes that this return will someday be a return of complete justice, of complete peace, a return to the vision of that original promised land. I'd like to call forward Jeff Turetsky to lead us, to lead the opening blessings and to chant the text. The Haftarah for the second day begins on page 564 in your Machzor.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar b'nviim tovim v'ratzav v'divreihem hane'emarim be'emet. Baruch atah Adonai habocher b'torah uv'Moshe avdoho u'v'viei ha'emet v'tzedek. Ko amar Adonai matzachen bamidbar am sridei charev haloch lahargi'o Yisrael merachok Adonai nir ali v'yahavat olam ahavtich al kein mishachti chased od efnech v'nivnehet betulat Yisrael Od tadi tu payich veyatzat b'machol mesachakim. Od tadi cheramim behare shomron. Natu nodim vechilelu. Ki yesh yom karu notzrim behar Ephraim. Kumu v'na'alet Zion El Adonai Eloheinu. Ki ho amar Adonai Ranu leYaakov simcha v'tzahalu b'rosh hagoyim hashmi'u hallelu ve'imru Hosha Adonai et amcha et she'erit Yisrael. Hineni mevi otam me'eretz safon v'kibatztim me'akte aretz bam iver ufiseach hara ve'yoledet yachdav kahal gadol yashuvu heina. Birchvi yavohu utachanunim ovilem olichem el nahale mayim bederech yashar lo yikashlu ba ki hayiti leYisrael le'av ve'Ephraim bechorihu shim'u devar Adonai goyim Vehigidu va'im imerchak va'imru mezarei Yisrael yakabtzenu ushmaro keroe edro kifada Adonai et Yaakov uk'alo miyad chazak mimenu Uva'u v'rinenu v'imrom Sion v'naharu el tuv Adonai al Dagan ve'al Tirosh ve'al Yitzhar ve'al b'nei Tzon uvakar ve'haita nafsham kegan raveh v'lo yosifu leda'ava od. Az tismach betula b'machol uvachurim uzkenim yachdav v'hafachti evlam lesason v'nichamtihim v'simachti migonam Veriveti nefesh hakohanim dahashen ve'ami etuvi yisba'u ne'um Adonai ko amar Adonai kol beramaha nishma nehi bechi tamrurim Rachel mevaka al baneha me'ana lihinachem al baneha ki einenu Ko amar Adonai min kolech mi bechi ve'enayich midim'ah ki yesh sachar lif'ulatech ne'um Adonai ve'shavu me'eretz oyev Vayesh tikva le'acharitech ne'um Adonai ve'shavu vanim ligvulam Shamahati Ephraim mitnodei Yisartani ve'ivaser ki egel lo lumad Hashiveni ve'ashuva ki ata Adonai Elohai ki acharei shuvi nichamti ve'acharei hivad'i Safachti al yarech, boshti v'gam nichlamti, ki nasati cherpat neurai. Aven yakir li Ephraim, im yeled sha'ashu'im, ki midei dabri bo, zachar ez kerenu od, Al kein hamu me'ai lo rachem arachamenu ne'um Adonai. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, sur kol haolamim, tzadik b'chol hadorot, hayal haneman, haomer v'yoseh, hamedaber u'mekayem, shekol devarav, emet v'tzedek, ne'eman atahu Adonai Eloheinu, v'ne'emanim devarecha, v'devar echad mivarecha, chor lo yashuv reikam, ki el melech ne'eman v'rachaman, ata baruch atah Adonai, hayal haneman b'chol devarav. Rachem al Tzion ki hi beit chayenu, ulamcha Yisrael toshia bimheira v'yameinu, baruch atah Adonai, mesamech Tzion bevanecha. Samcheinu Adonai Eloheinu behiliyahu hanavi avdecha, bimheira yavo v'yagel libeinu, v'hashiv lev avot al banim, v'lev banim al avotam, uveitcha beit tefila yikarei lechol ha'amim, baruch atah Adonai, mevi shalom la'ad.
Beautiful. Thank you. So good to hear all these words in their proper place. A moment to pray for peace, as is a tradition at this point in the service. Some of us are still reverberating from a while ago when Mike chanted the Unatana Tokef, and we don't often get to take that all the way to the end with this wonderful image of our fragility, where we are analogized to grass that withers and flowers that fade and vessels that break, shadows that pass, and kechalom ya'uf, the last of this list, a dream that flies away. Each of us is a dream that flies away. But before we flutter off, we make a difference. And I introduce this way because today's prayer for peace is actually taken from Langston Hughes, who introduced the imagery of dream into that sort of place where activism and poetry met, which directly influenced Dr. King, and indirectly, he later said, through playwright Lorraine Hansberry. And the 1963 I Have a Dream speech was rooted to a great extent in this very short 16-line poem of Langston Hughes about peace and justice expressed through a dream. It is simply called I Dream a World. We all have our blind spots. Many of us are still working on them around race and around gender, and this is very gendered language, but the rhyme scheme would be lost without it. So I'm just putting a big sick in front of that piece. The rest stands so beautifully. I dream a world where man, no other man, will scorn, where love will bless the earth, and peace its paths adorn. I dream a world where all will know sweet freedom's way, where greed no longer saps the soul, nor avarice blights our day. A world I dream where black or white, whatever race you be, will share the bounties of the earth, and every one is free. Where wretchedness will hang its head, and joy, like a pearl, attends the needs of all mankind. Of such I dream, my world. Keni Hiratzo. Inviting Sarah Batya to please join us as we return the Torah to the Ark and turn toward Musaf. Page 606. Great.
זכור יאמר שוב אדוני רבבות אלפי ישראל, כי לקח טוב נתתי לכם תורתי, אל תעזובו. עץ חיים היא למחזיקים בה, ותומכיה מאושר דרכיה דרכי נועם וכל נתיבותיה השלום. השיבנו אדוני אליך ונשובה, חדש ימינו כקדם. השיבנו אליך ונשובה, חדש ימינו כקדם. השיבנו אליך ונשובה, חדש ימינו כקדם. יאללה לה לה יאללה, יאללה לה לה יאללה, יאללה לה לה יאללה לה יאללה יאללה לה, יאללה לה לה יאללה, יאללה לה לה יאללה, יאללה לה לה יאללה לה.
Thank you to all who participate. All that's left is Musaf, the three great themes, though it's not always obvious how these three hang together. We end with the many symbolisms and uses of shofar. The middle section is about divine remembering, and the first, this one, Malchuyot, is a collection of themes and biblical quotes about divine rule. It's often noted that Rosh Hashanah is a re-coronation of sorts, our annual re-acceptance of God's rule, both as reality and as right. That's a metaphysical claim, one that many moderns can still embrace, but others may find they have trouble with. Kind of like how in the path of Musar, emunah, or faith, is one of the hardest midot, or virtues, for many of us empirically inclined folk to focus on and to cultivate. But clearly, God doesn't need our assent in order to be God. God is God, infinite, ineffable, ideal, while we mere mortals are finite, frail, fleeting. So what's really going on here? Why this liturgical focus on godly rule? I think maybe the most important element is not the coronation, it's for us, to help us to acknowledge our finitude, our frailty, in light of that big picture. Perhaps the operative midah, or attribute here, is actually anava, humility, or putting ourselves in proper proportion, great enough to be bearers of the divine image, but tiny in comparison to divinity itself. And this is teshuvah. When we're full of ourselves, we can scarcely see the places where we've missed the mark. And without that honest reckoning, no change is going to come. But once we accept our smallness, our imperfection, our limitations, then we can open ourselves to a true cheshbon hanefesh, soul accounting, a sober and solid search of our shortcomings. True teshuvah perhaps requires, and is certainly aided by, first recognizing that we are not the end-all and be-all. So theological subtleties aside, embrace the metaphor. Be humbled in the face of creation, of totality, of God and divine rule, malchuyot. And from that place, let's all engage in a deep turning that lasts in the improvement that it leads to. Again, in its only twice a year original context, Aleinu is the introduction to Malchuyot. Page 612. We'll see it again Shabbat after Shabbat, day after day across the year. So may Aleinu's perpetual place in prayer be our year-round reminder to stay humble, stay open, and practice cheshbon hanefesh in every season. Page 612. For Malchuyot, we rise in spirit or in body.
Aleinu l'shabeach l'Adon hakol l'atid gedula liotzer bereshit borei hashamayim v'noteihem roka haaretz v'tzetzaecha notei neshama la'am alecha v'ruach l'holechim ba. V'anachnu korim u'mishtachavim Hamalachim Hakdusha Beruchahi Shehu Noteh Shamayim Yosed Aretz Moshe Kenu Bashamayim Ashkinu Tuzo Bakavim Broim Hunu Henu Henu Bakinu Kenu Neilu Mishmat Tachateinu Dar Kenika Velechanu Henu Lirot Mihira Deveru Zechalav L'taken olam malchut Shaddai v'chol b'nei basar yikru v'yishmecha v'havdot elecha lo yishonim b'milush. Ki hamalchut shelecha hi ul'olamei ad timloch b'chavod.
Turning now to page 620, toward the top of the page. V'nemar Seu she'arim ra'ashechem v'hinaseu pitchei olam v'yavu melech hakavod Mize melech hakavod Adonai Yizuz v'gibor Adonai gibor milchama
שאו שערים ראשיכם עושו פתחי עולם יבוא מלך הכבוד מיהו זה מלך הכבוד אדוני צבאות הוא מלך הכבוד סלע ועל ידי עבדיך כל עבדים עבדו שמך כל המעלה אני הראשון ואני האחרון ולעדיין אלוהים הנאמר ויעלו משה מעצם שמותיו ושבעת המלוכה ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ וימלכו יחיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד ובתורתך כתוב לאמור שמע ישראל אדוני אלוהינו אדוני echad.
We turn now to 628, the approaching Chatimah, the sealing of the blessing of God's sovereignty. 628.
Eloheinu Elohei Avotenu ve'imotenu Meloch al kol ha'olam kulo bichvodecha ve'hinaseh al kol haaretz bikarecha ve'hofa bahadar geon uzecha al kol yoshvei tevel artzecha ve'yada kol paul ki ata ve'alato ve'adin kol yatzur ki ata yitzarto ve'omar kol asher neshama ve'apo Adonai melech u'malchuto b'kol mashallah Eloheinu Elohei avotenu ve'imotenu Kadeshenu b'mitzvotecha Tein chalkeinu b'toratecha Sabayenu mituvecha Samecheinu b'shuatecha 632 V'tachel libeinu le'ovdecha be'emet Ki ata Elohim emet u'darecha emet v'kayam lad Beruchat Yashchina Malkal kol haaretz Mekadeshet Yisrael Melech al kol haaretz Mekadesh Yisrael Melech al kol haaretz Mekadesh Yisrael Ve'yom haki hazikaron
Shofar blowers have been tested and will be blowing away from the kahal, but we are indoors. Page 632. Tekiah, Shavarim Teruah, Tekiah, Tekiah, Shavarim Teruah, Tekiah, Tekiah, Shavarim Teruah, Tekiah, Aretz. Asher tzvatenu yerav lefanecha el ram ram benisa mehevinu ma'azin ma'bitu ma'akshiv lekol tkiatenu utkabel berachamim uvratzon seder seder malchuyotenu. You may be seated. Yasher Koach Neil, who for many years has captained our Ba'alei Tikia, as well as being among them. Mike,
L'Shana Tova, it's an honor to be here and to come to this second section of our Musaf, Zichronot, as Rabbi Fred mentioned before. This is a section of divine remembrances, of the promise that divinity will remember us. And this year, I also would like to charge that it also can go both ways, and that we too remember our side of the promise. And that we, as one spiritual advisor once told me, recall that with remembrance, the path is steep. And that we remember this Yom Tov, who we truly are and who we truly wish to be. Who we truly are and who we truly wish to be. And with that comes a mission that I believe that each of us has. Unique to us, there are so many causes out there, and I pray that we remember what is our cause. And with that, I keep a promise that I made to mention today my own cause as a former prison chaplain of John Henry Ramirez, who has but a few hours to live, and who I spoke with last night, offering the vidui, the final confessional. His victim's son does not want him to be killed, but Texas sees it differently. And so I promised him that I would remember him as well. I invite you to find that cause that burns so deeply within you, that comes from such a profound place that it can move you to new heights in the year to come. May we remember who we truly are. I'd like to open us up with this song about Zichronot from Shoshana Yedwab.
I remember, I remember, I remember, I remember, I remember, I remember, I remember you. I remember, I remember, I remember, I remember, I remember, I remember, I remember you. Lechtech acharai, acharai bamidbar. Lechtech acharai be'erez lo zruah. How you walked with me, walked with me, walked with me. How you walked with me when we were young and free. Lechtech acharai, acharai bamidbar. Lechtech acharai be'eretz lo zruah. I remember, I remember, I remember, I remember, I remember, I remember, I remember you. I remember, I remember, I remember, I remember, I remember, I remember, I remember you.
636. So we continue with the traditional liturgy of the Zichronot service. אתה זוכר מעשי עולם ופוקד כל יצורי קדם, לפניך נגלו כל תעלומות והמון נסתרות משבראשית. כי אין שכחה לפני כיסא כבודך, ואין נסתר מנגד עיניך. אתה זוכר את כל המפעל, וגם כל היצור לא נכחד ממך. הכל גלוי וידוע לפניך, אדוני אלוהינו, צופה ומביט עד סוף כל הדורות, כי תביא חוק זיכרון להיפקד כל רוח ונפש, להיזכר מעשים רבים והמון בריות לאין תכלית. מראשית כזאת הודעת ומלפנים אותך גילית, זה היום תחילת מעשיך, זיכרון ליום הראשון. כי חוק לישראל הוא משפט לאלוהי יעקב, ועל המדינות בו יאמר. איזו לחרב ואיזו לשלום, איזו לרעב ואיזו לשובע. And we turn now to 642 for part of the verses that we read in the Haftarah earlier from Jeremiah. And also, as we recall, the verse that we recited, that in which Jeremiah said, "For as I change, I have rethought my life, and now that I know more, I'm stricken deep within. I am ashamed, I feel disgrace, I bear in pain the errors of my youth. But I have been redeemed." 642.
ונאמר, ויזכור לכם בריתו, וינחם קרוב חסדיו. ועל ידי עבדיך הנביאים כתוב לאמור, הלוך וקראת באוזני ירושלים לאמור, כה אמר אדוני, זכרתי לך חסד נעורייך, אהבת כלולותייך, לכתך אחרי במדבר, בארץ לא זרועה. ונאמר, וזכרתי אני את בריתי אותך בימי נעורייך, והקימותי לך ברית עולם. ונאמר, הבן יקירי אפרים, אם ילד שב Yeshuim Ki midei dabri bo Zachor ezkerenur Al kein Ramun Ne'ailo Rachem Arachamenu Neum Adonai Neum Adonai.
Yasher koach. Can we just sing the refrain for a second? I remember.
I remember, I remember, I remember, I remember, I remember, I remember you.
Please rise.
I remember, I remember, I remember, I remember, I remember, I remember, I remember you.
The bracha, page 646, to lead us into the Shofar Blasts, which we'll hear this time from Matt Wald.
כי זוכר כל הנשכחות אתה ומעולם ואין שכחה. There is no forgetting לפני כיסא כבודך. ועקדת יצחק לזרעו היום ברחמים תזכור. ברוך אתה אדוני. זוכר הברית. תקיעה. שברים. תקיעה. תקיעה. שברים. תקיעה. תקיעה. שברים. תקיעה. ארשת שפתנו ירב לפניך אל רם רב ונישא מבין ומאזין מביט ומקשיב לכל תקיעתנו ותקבל ברחמים ברחמים וברצון סדר סדר זיכרונותינו.
So be seated now for one more moment. Yasher koach to Matt Wald and to Chazan Mike Zusman. Will this stay? No? The final and third segment of our Musaf prayers leading us to the close of our service this morning. The nusach, the melody patterns that we use for Musaf, sounds like it's the same word, but it's not, tend to be in a very triumphal mode, as we're going to hear in just a moment, especially this last section, Shofrot. We're going to sing Hallelujah. It's a moment of celebration. And yet we can pause to think of the source, the inspiration for the 100 shofar blasts we're meant to hear on Rosh Hashanah. And at least one of those sources of inspiration from our own tradition, from our own Tanakh, are the pangs of pain, the cries of pain that come from the mother of the enemy general Sisera when she begins to understand that her son is not coming home. She's left at the window, waiting for him, first wondering where he might be, and then coming to understand that he's not coming back, and the cries come forth. And that cry is meant to pierce us, to make us to feel the compassion that is inherent in all of us. It's there for all of us, but sometimes it's hard to reach. Who knows whether Sisera ever lived or Sisera's mother, but we can hear the cries of pain and longing in our own time, in our own community even. And I'm reminded here of the simple custom that when we see an emergency vehicle going by on the road, we're not only expected to pull over, following traffic laws, but in our tradition, we're asked to say a prayer of well-being for whoever is about to be rescued, hopefully, in that vehicle, whether we agree with their politics or not. We're meant to pause and get out of the way and say, I hope it will be okay for whoever that is. Let this final set of shofar blasts be like that siren going off for us, not only to spark our joy and celebration at this new year, but to help us dig deep and find the well of compassion that our species so desperately needs. And we, if we're in this room together today, or if we're watching remotely, are blessed to be on the giving side of. Ask us now to turn to page 654. For the opening verses of Shofarot. Ata nigleta ve'anan, ata nigleta be'anan kivotcha, am kodshecha ledaber imam. מן השמיים השמעתם קולך ונגלית עליהם בערפלי טוהר. גם כל העולם כולו חם מפניך ובריות, בראשית חרדו ממך בהגלותך מלכנו על ההר סיני ללמד לעמך תורה ומצוות ותשמיעם את הוד קולך ודיברות קודשך מלהבות אש. בקולות וברקים עליהם נגלית ובקול שופר עליהם הופעת ככתוב בתורתך. ויהי ביום השלישי בחיות הבוקר, ויהי קולות וברקים וענן כבד על ההר, וקול שופר חזק מאוד ויחרד כל העם אשר במחנה. ונאמר ויהי קול שופר הולך וחזק מאוד, משה ידבר והאלוהים יעננו בקול. Page 659. Hallelujah, 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 el bekodsho, hallelujah, birkiauzo. Alleluia, bigvurotah,
kerov gudlo. Kol haneshama tehalel ya, hallelujah, hallelujah. Kol haneshama tehalel ya, hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Betake a shofar, hallelujah, benevel vechinor, hallelujah, betov umachol, hallelujah, beminim veugav, hava neshama tehalel ya, hallelujah, hallelujah. Kol haneshama tehalel ya, hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Betzil telei shama, hallelujah. Betzil telei trua, kol haneshama tehalel ya, kol haneshama tehalel ya. 664, just before the shofar calls, the bracha to lead us there. Ki ata shomea kol shofar, uma'azin trua ve'en dome lach. Baruch atah Adonai, shomea kol truat amo Yisrael, berachamim. Please rise. Just want to offer a moment of quiet just to tune our ears, to listen even more clearly to this final set of calls, to hear whatever it is we need to hear today. Tkiya, teruah, tekiah, tekiah, teruah, tekiah, tekiah, teruah, tekiah gedolah. Areshet tzvatenu ye'erav lefanecha, ram ram v'nisa, mevinu mazin mabit u'makshiv, lekol tkiatenu utkabel berachamim berachamim uvratzon. Seder, seder, shofrotenu. We come to the very end of our prayers today. We can be seated. As I lift this microphone, it feels like a fitting moment to say a word of gratitude to the wonderful team that's been with us, helping us to transmit our services and our gatherings to all of the people who are joining us. So to thank Blue House Productions and Daniel, who's with us today, and Jeff Gruber, who's been with us all along. Oh, Jeff is here too. Great. We are so grateful to you and feel like we're held in really good hands here. Thank you.
And once again, thank you to all the participants, the readers and the shofar sounders, the daveners, the musicians, everyone. We all add a great deal. And each of us in the room and each of us online being part of a sacred community. And even if we're not physically together all in the same room at the same time, we are all hyperlinked to one another. Press on one of us and you'll get all of us. And it's a beautiful thing. We are, of course, hyperlinked across the generations as well. Page 1216, we remember those who are no longer with us, but whose influence and essence we carry with us into this new year. Inviting all those who are in mourning or commemorating a yahrzeit to rise, or as may be your custom, page 1216, the Mourner's Kaddish. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shmei Rabbah, be'alma divra chirute v'yamlich malchute, b'chayechon uvyomechon uvchaye dechol beit Yisrael, ba'agala uvizman kariv v'imru. Amen. Yehe shmei Rabbah mevarach le'olam l'olmei almaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shmei dekudsha b'richu le'ela le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata ta'amiran be'alma v'imru. Amen. Yehe shlama Rabbah min shemaya v'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Oseh shalom b'mramav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'al kol yoshvei tevel v'imru. Amen. Zichronam livracha.
Just a few announcements to bring us to a close and then a chance to sing ourselves out together. So once again, Shana Tova to everyone. May it be a good year somehow for all of us, for all of our loved ones, and for all our world. And may good health especially be the blessing that comes this year. Stay tuned, please. Maybe as early as tonight, actually, there'll be an updated announcement about some special plans we have for this coming Shabbat Shuvah. We are hopefully going to take advantage of the beautiful forecast that has been given us so far. And there would be more opportunities to tune in online as well. Want to mention again, as Judy Ackerman and Marcy Greenstein, our presidents, spoke to us yesterday, we do have our giving season going on right now. We're not hearing a super lot about it because there's plenty of other things going on, but asking please for everyone to give some thought to your covenantal gift to our community. And I'm not going to mention the other synagogue in Montgomery County that we've been in a hot competition with around manna. I'm just not going to mention their name because there have been some suggestions that there was some bin stuffing last year. And that the winner, I'm not sure. So we're getting ahead of them this year. The blue bin is outside for collections, and we also have a link on our website where you can just by the click of a button, give to manna and acknowledge that it's on our side, not their side. And obviously, this is all just by way of good humor to help us to collect the needed nourishment for people in our own community who are unfathomably in this wealthy area, food insecure.
So staggeringly, we are wrapping up our Rosh Hashanah, and that's a lot of the heavy lift at the very beginning of the year, but there's a lot more. And we are only less than 36 hours into the new year and into the 10 days of repentance, 8.3 of which are still ahead of us. So use each and every one of those for the work of this season, for Teshuvah, for Tefillah. We will see you again on Shabbos and across Yom Kippur, online and or in person, and for Tzedakah, both to manna and to Adat Shalom, and in the sense of tzedek, the righteous action that we take in every dimension in this world. Teshuvah, tefillah, tzedakah, can't go wrong. May it be as healthy and as sweet and as together a new year as possible.
Amen.
Page 674, actually, or 12,
Yeah,
1222,
it's
we're
here.
already there.
Yeah.
1222, our concluding verses.
Look with me there for a moment. 1222, beginning the third line from the bottom in the Hebrew, the most beautiful of passages from our prophet Isaiah. It's not transliterated, so I'm just going to say it once just so we can remember what it sounds like and fill in the elliptical words that they decided not to print here. Vahaviotim el har kodshi, v'simachtim beveit tfilati. Vahaviotim, I will bring you to my holy mountain, and I will rejoice and make you rejoice in my house of prayer. Olotechem vezivchechem liratzon al mizbechi. All of your offerings will be wanted on my altar. Ki veti beit tefillah yikare lechol ha'amim. Because my house will be a house of prayer for all people. Ask us to rise together and sing these words and wish everyone once again Shana Tova. Our ark is open. Vahaviotim el har kodshi, v'simachtim beveit tfilati. Vahaviotim el har kodshi, v'simachtim beveit tfilati. Olotechem, וזבחיכם, לרצון, על מזבחי, כי ביתי בית תפילה, יקרא לכל העמים, והביאותים אל הר קודשי, ושימחתים בבית תפילתי. One last, והביאותים אל הר קודשי, ושימחתים בבית תפילתי. Shana Tova, and now we can begin to say Gemar Chatima Tova. Thank you.
Likewise. Hey. Good morning.